Starting. You've been asked to give a presentation, so where do you start? The S in the S.I.L.V.E.R presentation methodology is for starting. And thankfully, there's a tool called the S.I.L.V.E.R Presentation Preparation Grid. It contains 18 easy steps in a one-page format. And this pre-work will help you create a powerful presentation, crafting a message in a way that's both loud and clear. The 6 steps of the grid follow the acronym of S.I.L.V.E.R. The first 3 elements, the S, the I, and the L, are about organizing your presentation. So let's start with the S. The S is for starting. We start with the big picture and the why for our presentation. What's the topic and what's the objective? What's in it for your audience? Why will they listen to you? And what's the one thing that they'll remember? That one thing is your central idea. Because communication only occurs when your audience can repeat the central idea in their words. The I in the S.I.L.V.E.R framework is for illustrating. Illustrating is about the construction of your presentation. It begins with starting strong. You have to earn the attention of your audience. So how will you start? Well, do you have a story, a fact, or a current event that engages the audience and gets them to lean in to listen? Next, what are your 3 main points? Lastly, how will you end? What's your call to action when closing the presentation? What do you want the audience to do? The L in the S.I.L.V.E.R is for learning. This is the last step in preparation. Learning is about getting familiar with your presentation. It requires you to set aside time to get comfortable with learning it. Don't put this off. This isn't a to-do list type of thing. You need to schedule time for 3 important activities. First is to outline your presentation. I'm a big fan of using Post-it notes and a Sharpie to represent each slide I'll ultimately create. The Post-it notes allow me to move things around really easily, and the size in the Sharpie forces me to keep things kind of big picture. Second, you need time to practice key parts. And lastly, you need to schedule uninterrupted time to rehearse your presentation from beginning all the way to the end. The next 3 elements of S.I.L.V.E.R deal with the delivery of your presentation. The V in S.I.L.V.E.R is for vaulting. Vaulting is about starting your presentation strong. First impressions matter. Make those first critical few minutes count. First, who is introducing you and what are they saying? Here you don't need a lengthy bio, just a couple of paragraphs that speak to your background, why you are qualified to give this presentation, and maybe a teaser of what will be covered in the presentation. Second, how are you dressed and what's your background? And lastly, how will you begin your presentation? What are the first 6 words out of your mouth? The E in S.I.L.V.E.R is for educating. Educating is about the meat of your presentation. You've started strong and now you'll share 3 key points. For each key point in the grid, we want to spend some time thinking about the following. What's the story or the case study you'll share? What's the application or exercise for the audience? And what's the key insight that ties back to that central idea? The R in S.I.L.V.E.R is for requesting. People tend to remember the last things you say, so make those last things count. In psychology, this is called the serial position effect, and it's more commonly referred to as the recency effect. People tend to remember and best recall those things at the end. So here are 3 things for the last step of requesting. First, know when and how you'll handle questions. Here is the key. Don't do it at the end of the presentation. Do it before you close. Second, know the story you are going to close with, the story that ties everything all together. And third, know your call to action. What do you want the audience to do? This one-page silver preparation grid now contains the bones of your presentations, and now it's time to flesh them out. We'll cover that in our next video on illustrating. Illustrating. You've understood your objective, you've boiled it down to your central idea, the outline's been completed, and now it's time to enhance your presentation through the use of visuals. Illustrating is about thinking about how you use visuals for your presentation. And here are some questions you should be asking. Does this talk require slides? If so, which tool will I use? PowerPoint, Keynote, Prezi, Virtual Whiteboard? Can I use props? What are the key points and what's the best way to illustrate them? Do I have the skills to actually make the visuals, or should I enlist help? First, let's address whether or not you should use visuals. And the answer is it depends. The single biggest reason for using them is memorability, right? You want to be both loud and clear when you communicate your message. Our objective is to share our message in a way that's rememberable. Our ability to recall a message is enhanced by up to 650% when we use visuals. 650%. Why such a big bump? It's because of a thing called the picture superiority effect. And it refers to the fact that pictures and images are more likely to be remembered than just words alone. It's based on how our memory works and how we process information. It's called dual coding. Using both creates both verbal and image codes, whereas only hearing words generates a single verbal code. If you hear something, 3 days later, recall is about 10%. But if you hear words and add a compelling image, 3 days later, recall is upwards of 65%. So should you use images? Well, the answer is only if you want the audience to actually remember your message or call to action. Let's dive into some tips on how to create dynamic visual presentations. And we start with a tool that supports the overwhelming majority of presentations, and that tool was originally called Presenter. Launched by Apple all the way back in 1987, right? It actually sold 8,000 copies on its first day and sold out. Robert Gaskins had created the program 3 years earlier, and it solved a big problem. Up until that point, most presentations were done with transparencies and an overhead projectors. Unfortunately, a New Jersey company had already trademarked the name Presenter. Gaskins thought up a new name while in the shower, and that new name, PowerPoint. Interesting name. What exactly is a PowerPoint? Well, the concept comes from photography. It's commonly known as the rule of thirds, where the camera viewfinder is divided like a tic-tac-toe grid. You might see this when taking a picture on your smartphone. The grid creates 9 equally sized boxes, and where the intersection points of the box, those are the 4 PowerPoints. This leads us to our first important tip in slide design. By the way, TIP is an acronym for To Improve Presentations. The tip is to use the 4 PowerPoints. First, use them when placing the focus of your image. Second, use the PowerPoints as a reference point for where you should place text on the slide. As we just learned from the picture superiority effect, images can aid memory of the spoken word. These images typically translate into slides, but these highly effective visuals can derail a presentation with the overuse of one thing: text. Words can kill your presentation. There's a funny saying about this. Guns do not kill presentations, bullets do. The saying is an adaptation of a famous quote from Senator Patrick Moynihan. He had proposed taxing bullets as opposed to guns. And he said guns don't kill people, bullets do. Let's examine the 4 biggest mistakes when using bullets. The first is to simply overuse them. The second is to bring them all in at once. Because what happens when you're speaking to the first bullet? The audience is already skipping ahead and ignoring you. 3, reading your bullets is a mistake. Don't insult the intelligence of your audience. On average, they can read 4 times faster than you speak. And you know what? People who can read cannot not read. The 4th mistake is using full sentences with your bullets, or the cardinal sin, multiple sentences. So here's the tip: don't use bullets if you can, and if you can, don't even use words. But if you do use text, here are 5 general principles to abide by. First, keep text to a minimum. No more than 16 words. And no less than 30-point font. Second, speaking of fonts, pick a good one to use. Ditch the default font. Third, avoid the bottom third of the slide. Words on the bottom third may be cut off by people's heads, so don't put anything that's important on the bottom of the slide. Fourth, understand contrast. Place light colored text on a darker background and light colored text on a dark background. In summary, for illustrating your presentation, use images, limit text, and put more power in your PowerPoint. In our next video, we'll examine the L in S.I.L.V.E.R, which is for learning. Learning. The 3rd step in preparation is learning your presentation. This involves practicing and rehearsing. And warning, this can be painful. And I think that's why most people avoid rehearsing and practicing. But don't fall victim to not putting in the time. Here are some tips to be more effective when learning your presentation. First, rehearse out loud and try to mimic the actual setting of your presentation. If you're going to be standing, rehearse or practice standing. Also know the difference between practicing and rehearsing. Practice. To quote Hall of Famer Allen Iverson, we talking about practice. Practice allows you to work on shorter sections of your presentation. And just like a basketball player might practice free throws or layups, here are 2 areas you should focus on. I'd recommend practicing the beginning and the ending. Practice your open and your close twice as much of what you do of the middle. Think of it like flying a plane. When are most planes most likely to crash? Unfortunately, most accidents occur during takeoffs and landings. So take the extra time to nail your opening and your closing. What's your opening story? And how are you closing, and what's your call to action? Don't forget the old New York City joke. A tourist stops a New Yorker on the street and says, excuse me, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? And the New York thinks for a second and goes, practice, practice, practice. In contrast to practice, rehearsing is running through your presentation from the beginning all the way to the end. This is important from a timing perspective, but more important to establish familiarity. You want to rehearse at least 3 times. Only after the 3rd or 4th time will you start to feel comfortable. And you want to be comfortable because the comfort level allows you to get out of your head and be more present. And speaking of being present, you can't spell the word presentation without present. All right, so it's not the gift type of presence, right? We're talking about being in the moment. And perhaps the best advice on this comes from Patsy Rodenberg. Patsy is acclaimed for her emphasis on expression and the primacy of the human voice. She established a framework for presence called the second circle. According to Rodenberg, being present is a state of mind where you're confident, you're relaxed, and you're in control, and it allows for that human connection. Rodenberg describes 3 kinds of presence when we speak: first circle, second circle, and third circle. First circle presenters focus their energy inward. They're in their own head, they're absorbed in their own thoughts, and they minimize eye contact and they don't connect with the audience. In contrast, third circle presenters are over the top, they're bombastic. They focus their energy outward, they dominate. They're loud, they're forceful. And they can come across more like they're telling as opposed to presenting. They might grab your attention, but you also might tune them out. In between the first and the third circle is the second circle. Second circle finds the right balance between awareness and being commanding. It puts you in the place you want to be. It allows you to connect with the audience and express yourself. So here's the tip. Achieve that right balance. Spend the majority of your time in the second circle. Learn your presentation well enough so you can be present. Being present, it's the greatest gift you can give your audience. Okay, so now we've covered the 3 steps of preparation with starting, illustrating, and learning. Now let's move on to the 3 keys of effective delivery. It begins with vaulting. Vault into your presentation and start strong. Why? Because when it comes to attention, you can't lose what you don't have. When you present, your audience's attention must be earned. And that starts with the very first words out of your mouth. How you open is a critical component of any speaking engagement. Forbes says that you make a first impression in just 7 seconds. That's 1 second shorter than the average human attention span. By the time you finish your first 2 sentences, they've already formed an opinion of you. And if you're typical, then that opinion isn't likely to be extraordinary. The goal is to make a positive splash and have them ready to be listening to what you're going to say next. If we only have 7 seconds, then skip the pleasantries and throw away things like "I'm happy to be here" and "thank you." Quit telling them what you're going to talk about. They either already know from your intro or the program, or they don't care. Just get to it. But what is it? What's the opening that works for both the presenter and the audience alike? You need a device that connects, a device that makes your audience want to listen. And nothing does that better than a story or a case study. Why? Because facts tell and stories sell. Stories connect and make your message memorable. And memorability is the holy grail of presenting. Here are 3 questions to ask about telling stories. First, when should you use stories? Answer: early and often. Second, how long should your stories be? Answer: it depends on the time you have. Practice stories with different levels of detail to help you manage things on the fly. A rule of thumb when timing your opening story is no more than 10% of the overall presentation. 3. What's your role in the story? Answer: you are the guide. Donald Miller writes in the book, Building a Story Brand, to enter into our customer story, we should play the role of guide. The fatal mistake is positioning yourself as the hero as opposed to the guide. You're Yoda, you're not Luke Skywalker. The late Joseph Campbell described the storytelling process as the hero's journey. A hero's journey occurs when something that happens that causes the main character to go on a journey from the known into the unknown. And during this journey, the hero faces challenges, and in the end, the hero learns a lesson and becomes transformed. They reemerge with greater knowledge. Nearly every Hollywood movie script follows this pattern. So if you want to bring your stories or cases to life, then give them CPR. Now, not cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but here's a simple 3-step formula. The C is for challenge. Set the situation of the story or the case study. What's the it that brought about the obstacle or challenge? The P is for plan. What's the right course of action? How would you or the audience address that challenge? This is a great point to interact with the audience. The R is for results. What did you learn? What resulted from your action or inaction? What's the insight or takeaway? Let's talk about how you start your opening story. Your first words are key. Think about every favorite book or movie. They don't open with, this is a story about, or let me tell you a story. They introduce the setting and then they get to it. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Star Wars. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. A Tale of Two Cities. From the visual of the ball chasing Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, or the simple uttering of Rosebud in Citizen Kane, the audience interest is piqued. You have far too much at stake to ramble at the beginning of your presentation. Get to it. Don't finish a presentation and think, whoa, I lost their attention somewhere. Win that attention from the start with a compelling story, because you can't lose what you never had. In the next video, we'll talk about the middle of a presentation. The E in the S.I.L.V.E.R framework is for educating. Educating. You've made a strong impression with the audience. You now need to connect your main points and keep your audience engaged. You need to entertain. The definition of entertain, according to Webster's, is to hold the attention of agreeably, to admit into the mind. And if you think about it, that's the real goal. To get the audience to consider your points and your claims. But here's the awful truth. If keeping the attention of the audience when speaking was a test, then about 80% of us would fail. This stat is from Dr. John Medina, and he shared it in his groundbreaking book, Brain Rules, where he talks about the 10-minute rule of audience engagement. No matter how compelling we are as a presenter, after 10 minutes, our audience's attention will start to wane. Unfortunately, a lot of presenters don't realize this, and they keep droning on and on. So to combat this, when we create our presentation, we need a plan to reset the audience every 8 to 10 minutes. Here are 6 solutions. 1. Ask a pointed question to the audience. Make them think. 2. Show a short and pertinent video clip. 3. Tell a relevant story or anecdote. 4. Use a different medium, a prop, a whiteboard, a flip chart. 5, change where you speak from and use the entire room. And 6, get the audience to stand up and pair up for a simple exercise. It doesn't matter how amazing the presenter you are, you have to mix it up. Doing the same thing over and over again will cause your audience to tune you out. Variety is not only the spice of life, but it also applies to presentations as well. Our role is to bring value and educate our audiences. And one of the ways we do this is by sharing data. And for those that understand data, it's proof positive to what we're saying is true. But for those that don't know the context or the subject matter, data can be really confusing. And in this information age, mere data is useless. Anyone can find a fact in like 30 seconds. Data by itself is not compelling. What is compelling is the insight you share about the data. What's the inside meaning of the data? That takes experience, a keen eye towards analysis, and an ability to decipher your topic and data for your audience. Data can be a powerful tool if you use it properly. So here are 3 questions I want you to think of. First, is that number big or is it small? Data can be used to make any point you want. You need to give the audience the impression, is it big or is it small? And you can do this with your gestures and your voice. It's whether it seems big or small that matters to the audience. Give them that clarification. Second, is that number expected or is it unexpected? What's the trend and history of the data? Knowing the context around it is important. Third, what does it mean to the audience? Whether it's big or small, whether it's trending up or down, pales in comparison to what it means to me as an audience member. Here's where context and background are important. Here's the tip. Don't just share data. Use size, expectation, and relevance to make it pop. We've now covered how to educate with our main points. In the next video, we'll talk about how to finish strong with the R of silver of requesting. Requesting. Perhaps the hardest part of giving a presentation is finishing. Presenters often start out wondering, how am I ever going to speak for 45 minutes? And by the time they get halfway through their allotted time, they have no idea how they're going to get through all of their material. We need to get to the finish line after we cover our main points. But before we finish, one thing that we're going to want to allot time for is questions and answers. Ideally, you want to open up Q&A, or as I prefer to call it, questions and comments. If you know you have 5 minutes for a final story, a wrap-up, and your call to action, then perhaps you plan on taking questions 10 minutes from your finishing time. At 6 minutes left, answer that last question and go directly into your close. If you get to Q&C with 5 minutes left, then simply politely excuse and don't do Q&A. Go right into your close. Another best practice is to plant a question or two in the audience. Or alternatively, open up your Q&C with, let me start by sharing the question I'm almost always asked. So while you're answering this question, it provides space for the audience to engage with the next question or comment. The rule of thumb with questions is that once the second comment or question has been shared, the floodgates begin to open. After you address questions, how should you finish? Ideally, you finish with a closing story that reinforces the central idea and your main points. You want the story to be compelling. Take a cue from comedians. They typically start a set with their second best joke and they finish with their last. Once you've shared that story, you're ready for the call to action. The call to action is what you want your audience to do next. What do you want them to accomplish as a result of your presentation? A few things to keep in mind when closing. It's 1, maybe 2 sentences. This is not the place to offer an additional opinion or add detail. Be clear with your call to action. This isn't a time for subtlety. This is a time to exhibit passion and energy. Don't limp to the finish. Go big. I'd be remiss if I didn't share one last point about closing your presentation. It's the only cardinal rule of presenting. When your time is up, you need to be done. Nothing's more egregious than stealing time from your audience. There is rarely, if ever, an excuse for going over the time you've been allotted. And it doesn't matter why. So get rid of excuses like, I started late, or I had more content to share, or something or someone hijacked my presentation. Unfortunately, there's no Academy Awards music to play you off the stage. You can always finish early, but you should never go over. That means you as the presenter need to know your time. So here are 5 hacks to alert you to time. 1, there's an app for that. Get a timer for your phone, your watch, or a tablet that silently buzzes. 2, go analog. Have somebody in the back of the room give you hand signals or signs. 3, click it. Buy a clicker that has a timer built into it. 4, use presenter mode. Presenter mode has a clock. Speaking of finishing, this brings us to the end of our videos. We've now learned the 6 steps of creating an effective and powerful presentation. By starting, spending time to outline our presentation. By illustrating, building out the presentation. By learning, scheduling time to practice and rehearse. By vaulting, starting our presentation strong to capture attention. By educating, covering our main points. And lastly, by requesting, finishing strong with a call to action. So here's my call to action for you. Be loud and clear when presenting. Be rememberable.